The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferentz.
A worker protection law with teeth. Walgreens among the companies settling a $2.3 million lawsuit in New York. How Starbucks is making union-busting attorneys pretty darn wealthy. And today on the show, the latest from the American Legion and the Alliance for Retired Americans. Welcome to the Friday, July 17th edition of America's Workforce, where we are available on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. We have 2 guests on the show today. We're going to kick things off with Henry Howard. Henry is the Deputy Director for Media and Communications on behalf of the American Legion. Legion.org is the website, and he is replacing Jeff Stouffer, who we may hear down the road. Jeff is moving out to Idaho. He's doing some special projects for the American Legion, so Henry is going to be our regular guest on the show. What we're going to do here is a recap of the celebration of America's 250th, a reenactment of the reading of the Declaration of Independence. You may not know this, but on July 8th of 1776, Colonel John Nixon gave the first public reading of the Declaration of Independence. This was to a crowd gathered in Philadelphia. Well, on July 4th, they did it all over again, and they dressed up just like colonial times. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the USA 250 Challenge, which includes how a Navy vet and his wife are improving their health and wellness thanks to the challenge. And what they're doing here is trying to find ways to keep people healthy, and that includes veteran suicide, the Be the One campaign. Also, on July 4th, this past July 4th, American Legion riders escorted a special American flag from Pittsburgh to D.C., the District of Columbia, where it was presented at the Washington Nationals game. Pretty cool stuff. We're also going to talk about the August edition, and we're also going to look at the past 250 years on all the contributions, the inventions that shaped the world. Things like the polio vaccine, the light bulb, the internet, Ellis Island. A lot of great stuff that came out of this country. And lastly, we're going to talk about the passing of Diane Carlson Evans, an Army nurse who led the fight for the Vietnam Women's Memorial. So Henry Howard will be our first guest. Our second guest on the show today is Norm Wernett, president of the Ohio Alliance for Retired Americans. The website is retiredamericans.org. And the first thing we're going to talk about is scrapping the cap. We've talked about this on the show for years now, and finally, we're seeing some results. Bernie Moreno, who is a conservative senator, pretty far to the right for the state of Ohio, and then you have Elizabeth Warren, who is pretty liberal from Massachusetts. They're saying, you know what, maybe we should scrap the cap on Social Security so we can extend Social Security for future generations. That was a big surprise. He's going to talk about that. Does it have legs in Congress? Who knows? The other issue is getting artificial intelligence out of traditional Medicare. And we talked about this with Rich Fiesta a couple of months ago. This is a pilot program in 6 or 7 states. Ohio is one of them, Arizona, Washington, Oklahoma, New Jersey. And what it does, it pretty much uses an algorithm to deny claims. So you got to fight for the health care that you're paying for. Retiredamericans.org is a website you got to go to. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at BoydWatterson.com. New York City's Mayor Zoran Mandami has reported a settlement of $2.3 million with corporations Walgreens, All-Star Security and Consulting, a company called Calzedonia, and Kinship Coffee. All these companies were accused of violating New York City's Fair Work Week law and protected time off law. Now, the laws require employers to provide 72 hours advance notice of work schedules and advance notice of schedule changes, among other provisions. One of the laws sets the floor for the amount of paid time off that employers are required to provide on an annual basis. The settlement includes both restitution to employees and civil penalties from each company. And this marks one of several multi-million-dollar settlements that the mayor and the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection have secured under the city's worker protection laws since he took office earlier this year. Mayor Mandami warned, "These laws exist because working families deserve stability on the job. If corporations choose to break them, well, they will pay what they owe." Meanwhile, the Second Circuit Court has declined to vacate a staffing dispute arbitration award that means the New York and Presbyterian Hospital must pay out $275,000 to its nurses union. The case originated with the union grievance alleging that management had violated the minimum staffing requirements set out in the collective bargaining agreement. So good news there. Legal analyst Matt Brunig, who we featured on the show, I want to say about a year ago, bright guy, he released an analysis of Starbucks' ongoing legal battle against the union, Starbucks Workers United. Listen to this. The report found that over the past 5 years, the Starbucks legal fight has generated over 16,000 documents, which is more than one document per organized worker. Employer-side firm Littler Medelson, remember that name? They have represented Starbucks in the vast majority of NLRB and judicial proceedings with 5 attorneys, 5 of them at the firm, working on over 200 Starbucks cases. As Brunig writes, the ability of employers to create an impossible legal environment for workers and organizers leaves federal labor law clearly at odds with its stated purpose. Amen to that. Yeah, they are a big union-busting law firm. We've talked about them on the show, Littler Medelson. Speaking of union busting, got to do a shout-out here to the team at Labor Lab. Here's a new set of LM-20s that were filed in the past week. And these are the forms that companies have to file if they're going to hire someone like Littler Medelson. Pye Barker Fire and Safety, they're out of Texas, hired LRI Consulting Services, $425 an hour. That election is still open. Smithtown Kia out of New York also hired LRI, $425 an hour. That election is open. And Gordon's Food Service out of Michigan, that's a big one. They hired East Coast Labor Relations, $4,000 a day. $4,000 a day. We don't know what's happening in that election. LaborLab.us, the website to go to. A lot of information there on who's trying to bust your union. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the latest from the American Legion. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LIUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Farrens.
And remember, you could check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Let's go to our featured guest today, Henry Howard. Henry is the Deputy Director of Media and Communications for the American Legion. And if you were listening to the podcast last month, we had Henry on the show along with Jeff Stouffer. Jeff is moving to Idaho. He has a family there taking care of his mom, which is priority number one. I totally understand that. He'll still be aligned with the American Legion, but in a different role. And Henry is now the Deputy Director of Media and Communications, and he's going to be our monthly featured guest on behalf of the American Legion. For complete updates, just go to legion.org. Henry, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us. And let's start off with kind of a recap of what happened on the 4th of July in celebration of America's 250th. I want to talk about that, and then we'll talk about the August edition, which we normally do here on the show. And there's some really good stories. In fact, one that's authored by Jeff. But let's start off with this. This is kind of interesting. The story of the first public reading. And I love this history part of what you do at the Legion. The first public reading of America's independence. We're going back to July 8th, of 1776. Henry, it's all yours. Talk to me about it.
Great. Thank you so much for having me again. And it's an honor to be here. So yeah, we, as the American Legion, celebrated the nation's 250th in a variety of ways. We had American Legion posts throughout the country participating in various events that kind of fit their communities. And we were able to send staff to several of those to cover interesting ones. And as you said, I think one of the most interesting ones was the actual reenactment of the first public reading of the Declaration of Independence. And as you noted, that was on July 8th. And we all know that the Declaration of Independence was signed on July 4th. So it's like, wait a second, that's 4 days. Like, this wasn't on Twitter 5 minutes after it was signed, right? Or live streamed on YouTube.
Right.
This was when the government at the time let the people know that this was signed, and this obviously was a historic moment, and it occurred on July 8th. And the very first public reading was in Philadelphia's State House Yard, which is now Independence Hall. And so an American Legion contingent in the state capitol in Michigan, in Lansing, did a reenactment. And a Legionnaire who I know, Navy veteran Brett Holt, who's an upstanding gentleman, played the role of Colonel Nixon and read what Colonel Nixon did 250 years ago. They had a crowd there, and what a neat way to celebrate history.
And they dressed for the part, did they not? I mean, it looks just like it did in 1776.
Yeah, I'm sure they had, as people probably can imagine, they had kind of the long, almost robe-like suits. They had the powdered wigs. They had the white socks where you could kind of see the end as their trousers, went a little bit below the knees. But yeah, it was a perfect reenactment.
I want to read part of what was said in the role of Thomas Jefferson, one of those who reenacted what happened in 1776. He said, "When citizens feel secure in their independence, connected to their neighbors, and empowered to pursue their aspirations, they become architects of a sustainable and prosperous future." I like that. I like that a lot. Amazing, amazing words that we cherish 250 years later. All right, let's talk about the USA 250 Challenge. And this involves, I guess, a Navy vet and his wife?
Yes, it did. It involved more than 3,100 American Legion family members throughout the course of the year. We kicked it off on July 3rd in 2025. And for the challenge, we created 3 different categories and challenged our participants, our members, to do 250 whatevers. They could, for the fitness category, they could walk 250 miles over the course of the year. For the wellness challenge, they could do 250 minutes of meditation or 250 buddy checks on fellow veterans. And then for the community service aspect, they could also do 250 buddy checks for that, or they could, work as a team to put together kits for kids, maybe lower income families where they could put like a school kit together of supplies that they would need, or deliver 250 meals to homeless veterans. So the idea was to get them involved in those 3 categories: fitness, wellness, community service, as a way to celebrate America over the year. And in 2025, we kicked it off with a track walk at the Mid-Ohio race with IndyCar driver Graham Rahal and some others. And before the race, as part of race weekend, American Legion members walked the track and it's 2.2 miles, I think is how long it is. But that's a way that they could get out, they could get moving, and just have fun doing it. And I wasn't there in 2025, but I went back this year because that's one of the ways that the 250 Challenge concluded. And some of the members who were there for the first walk were back again. And among those was Brad Beatty, another Navy veteran. And I asked him, as I was talking to him, about how the challenge has helped him. And he said, this really was a life changer. Both he and his wife committed to it. They are now walking 3 miles every day. And he talked about how it's not just the physical positivity that he's gotten from it. They've both lost 20 pounds through their walking, but his mental wellness has improved as well. He just feels better. He feels more like himself. And he's also taken that to where he's now able to participate more in community service through his American Legion posts. So he's a better Legionnaire, better member of the community in just kind of serving veterans and families in the area. So, that's pretty amazing that, that this one challenge, he went well beyond his 350 or 250 miles and is now walking 3 miles daily. And it's been a life changer for him, as he said.
It's funny you bring this up because I ran into an old friend a couple of weeks ago. He walks 8 to 10 miles per day.
Good for him.
And and he's knocking on 86, 87 right now in really, really good shape. There's something to be said about walking. No doubt about that. I'm glad that Brad and his wife are doing well. Here's another one here. This involves a once-in-a-lifetime moment. This happened right on the 4th of July, where American Legion riders escorted a special American flag from Pittsburgh all the way to D.C.?
Yeah, this was an event that was the brainchild of the National Flag Foundation. This flag has a really impressive passport. It has flown over all of the overseas memorials of the American Battle Monuments Commission, over cemeteries that where some of our soldiers and sailors, Marines, and others have been laid to rest over the wars of past years. And so the flag has made the rounds there. I believe it's also flown over every state capital in the United States, flown over Congress. It's been flown over Arlington National Cemetery. So it's been a flag that throughout the past year has shared America with many others. And so the National Flag Foundation invited our American Legion riders to be the ones who escorted it. It started in Pittsburgh very early on July 4th. That's where the Flag Foundation is headquartered. That's why it started there. And it went to Washington, D.C., and its first stop was at the Washington Nationals game, which ironically they were playing the Pittsburgh Pirates that day. And so at the seventh inning stretch, a past American Legion National Commander and another gentleman, his name is David Heredia. He was kind of the ride coordinator for this event and is our American Legion Riders chairman. They brought the flag out onto the field as people stood at the seventh inning and clapped and saluted the flag. And then from there, the flag went back to Arlington to honor our fallen on the nation's 250th birthday.
What a moment. All happened on July 4th of this year.
Yeah, amazing.
Henry, I got to take a break. Henry Howard joining us on our live line today. He is the Deputy Director of Media and Communications for the American Legion. For complete updates, and you can read a lot more about these stories, also access a whole lot of good video at legion.org. Real simple, legion.org. We'll talk about the August edition. And then later in the show, we're going to check in with Norm Ornett. Norm is the president of the Ohio Alliance for Retired Americans. Back in a few minutes, you're listening to America's Workforce.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Ironworkers. You can find more at ironworkers.org. This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org.
America's Workforce appreciates our sponsor, the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, who represents more than 18,000 workers from 19 affiliated local unions and district councils.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And don't forget, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis. And give us a rating. Always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. Also, thank you for listening to America's Workforce. I've been doing this show since 1998, podcasting now for 6 years plus. We are, for the 3rd year in a row, the #1 union podcast in America. And out of 2.5 million podcasts, you probably didn't realize there are that many podcasts, we rank 1,302. I like that. That is the top 0.001% of podcasts nationwide. Thank you for listening to America's Workforce. We appreciate that. Featured guest today is Henry Howard. Henry is the Deputy Director of Media and Communications at the American Legion. For complete updates, legion.org. In case you missed the beginning here, Henry is continuing the role of Jeff Stouffer. We might hear from Jeff down the road, but he's going to be taking care of his mom and also working for the American Legion out in Idaho. And this is the time where we preview the next month's edition. And in it, this is cool. I love this. course, we're celebrating 250 years as a country. And what you did in this edition, you took a look at some of the inventions from Americans that shaped and changed the world. Henry, I don't think we have enough time to talk about this, but obviously there's some at the top of the list. I'm going to turn it over to you. Go ahead.
And nor did we have space in the magazine for all of the achievements by American ingenuity either, which we note in the magazine. But yes, this was a way to kind of continue our coverage and celebration of America and its 250th. As you mentioned, there's obviously quite a vast number of these, and we do make that point that this is not inclusive. We picked out 10 notable ones. They're not the best 10, they're just 10 notable ones. And, one that was not included is the moon landing, which obviously was a historic moment. And the invasion of Normandy was not on there either, which you would probably maybe think that it would be for a Veterans magazine. Both of those are obviously historic, life-changing events. But we looked at others that were certainly changing America as well, too. And the first one I'm going to talk about is land-grant colleges. And it's obviously a fairly unique concept to the United States. That started back in 1862. A lawmaker named Justin Merrill of Vermont basically took an idea that Vermont had, and he worked through Congress to make this a national program. And so that was a way that education would be more prominent, be more accessible in the 1900s, which obviously led to more education and a more even a more skilled workforce through some of these colleges that are land grant institutions. And if you took all of the land area of all these institutions today, that's going to be 15 million acres. So what does that look like? That's basically the size of Connecticut. So if we moved everybody out of Connecticut, that the state becomes one massive land grant institution. That's just how big they are. And so this is a way that, still today, these institutions of higher learning are able to help, prepare the workers of tomorrow in various fields. Both of my sons went to Purdue University, which is a land grant institution. And while they didn't major in agriculture or veterinary science, those are two of the major schools at Purdue where lots of students attend and then are able to go on to careers in ag or being veterinarians or somewhere in that field. So that's one example. The consent of the governed is another one that we put in there. Trying out what was a very new thing in the 1770s called democracy was vastly different at the time and is still not as common as some would like. So that is another kind of experiment that was an accomplishment and achievement that America put together and is still with us today. Some of the others I'll hit on quickly are the electric light. Like, where would we be without electricity, light bulbs today? Air travel. We know the story about the Wright brothers and that first flight and how that's taken us to where we are today. The internet. We would not be doing this if it were not for the internet. Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to point out too, we went a little deep on those 10 that I mentioned, and we also put together a brief list of more bullet points on some others that we felt made the cut as well too, or just interesting ones that again all were born in America and I don't know if you remember this, if you read ahead on the magazine, but I thought this quote was absolutely fascinating about this one item. The inventor said it's lighter than air, stronger than whiskey, and cheaper than dust. Do you remember what that was?
No, I don't.
It's barbed wire. And so in 1876, John Wayne Gates described barbed wire as being lighter than air, stronger than whiskey, and cheaper than dust. And of course, barbed wire allowed cattle ranchers and homesteaders to pen in all of their livestock. And what a game changer that was for them.
What a description of barbed wire. I love that. Okay, now that'll be contained. You can read all of that in the August edition of the American Legion magazine. On a solemn note here, this is sad, the passing of Diane Carlson Evans. And who is she? Well, she led the effort to establish the Vietnam Women's Memorial, which is nearby other war memorials along the National Mall in D.C. Now, I know you didn't deal directly with her, and I understand Jeff Stouffer will be doing the eulogy. Is that correct?
Yeah, Jeff and Diane were very close. Jeff had written about her. He had been at the American Legion as Diane received permission, kind of the final approval for the memorial to go ahead, which was not an easy battle to fight. It was incredibly challenging through numerous logistics to get a memorial up along with the others on the National Mall. But Diane, who served in Vietnam, she was a combat nurse. And so she led this fight that was basically, she was finally able to get enough support and got the measure through Congress, which paved the way for the memorial to be dedicated. And so Jeff has been very close with her, has written about her. She has received major awards like the Patriot Award from the American Legion. And so Diane passed away in May, and the funeral will actually be in September. And so Jeff has been asked by the family to give her eulogy, which is obviously very important to him. But Diane's legacy will not be forgotten, and the American Legion will definitely not forget Diane Carlson Evans. In fact, each year I go to Washington, D.C. and cover the ceremonies at the Vietnam Wall. And what happens there is the American Legion and a couple dozen other mostly veterans organizations leave a wreath at the Vietnam Wall as part of the ceremony. And so the American Legion, proceeds to the Vietnam Women's Memorial, where they place a wreath that is a tribute not only to Diane Carlson Evans, but all the other women who were involved in the Vietnam War. And so that's a fitting tribute that obviously will continue. I was there this past Memorial Day, and it was it's always somber, but it's even a little bit more somber this year because Diane had just passed, and I know that myself and there are others who are especially thinking of her that day.
Yeah, apparently Diane had a long battle with cancer, and ironically, she died on May 20th, 5 days before Memorial Day. 5 days before Memorial Day. All right, Henry, great job. Thank you so much. Henry Howard, Deputy Director of Media and Communications on behalf of the American Legion, talking about the August edition. If you're a member, you should be getting it shortly. For complete updates, just go to legion.org. You take care. We'll talk to you next month, okay?
Thank you for having me. Take care.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Coming up next, the Ohio Alliance for Retired Americans. Back in a few minutes, you're listening to America's Workforce.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
The Heat and Frost Insulators and Allied Workers are proud to be a title sponsor for America's Workforce Radio. The Insulators Union is leading the way in the mechanical insulation industry, fire stopping, and infectious disease control. Regarded as North America's energy conservation specialists, these professionals are known for their professional work and dedication. You can learn more about the Insulators Union at insulators.org. America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org. Hire union musicians. Call Music Talent of Cleveland at 216-881-1802. Call Music Talent of Cleveland as your dependable source for professional musicians in Northeast Ohio. Union musicians add harmony to weddings, elegance to parties, and uplifting music for all events. Music Talent of Cleveland contracts solo and ensemble musicians as well as bands and orchestras for single engagements. So hire union musicians. Call Music Talent of Cleveland today. 216-881-1802. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Farrens.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast. AWF Union Podcast. Let's go to Central Ohio, and joining us is Norm Wernett. Norm, no stranger to America's Workforce. We've had him on the show a number of times. He serves as president of the Ohio Alliance for Retired Americans. Rich Fiesta usually does this slot, but, well, they got him working all around America right now, so Norm is filling in. Norm, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us today. RetiredAmericans.org. That's a website to go to. And I'll tell you, the first thing we're going to talk about, I'm so glad we're talking about this because it's been years. It's been years that we've been talking about scrapping the cap on Social Security. So if you're making, I think it's like $184,000 plus. Okay, when you go over that threshold, and I don't know how many people in this listening audience are at that level, but there are a number of people in America that have surpassed that. Once they do that, they no longer pay into Social Security. And this has gone nowhere until a couple of weeks ago. All right, Norm, what happened here?
So Bernie Moreno, earlier in the spring, had made a remark about, well, scrap the cap seems okay. And then all of a sudden, we find out he's penning an op-ed with Elizabeth Warren out of Massachusetts. That's an odd couple, if you can imagine it. One person who is leaning on the left end and one who's certainly leaned on the very right end of things. Bernie Moreno decided to say scrap the cap, which is, it's music to our ears, but we certainly hope he sticks with it because for 40 plus years, those folks who earn over that cap have just not paid into Social Security. They owe us that 40 years. We'll get going forward money into it if they really do scrap the cap. That would put Social Security in a good spot well into the next century. It's not a be-all and end-all as a solution to the issues that Social Security has, but it is a start, and it is the important start that we all need to support our social insurance system.
All right, Norm, now that Moreno has come out, are others following, to your knowledge? What are you hearing?
Right now, not so many on the Republican side, but certainly on the Democratic side, it has drawn a lot of interest. The campaign is now going forward. This next Congress, the senators who are going to be elected in this next tranche of elections will have to deal with the issue of Social Security's solvency. It's been known for 40 years that this is the issue, that solvency would end around this period of time. We all started paying forward and built up this huge trust fund, about $2.7 trillion. Now that the boom generation is retiring, that's being drawn down. We need to build that up for the next generation. That's just simple economics. And it's a way that we're buoyed by the fact that some folks in the Congress are beginning to think about it. If the cap isn't scrapped, and if we end up with the living in the trust fund with just the income coming in from workers, then those of us who are already retired or living on disability or living on the benefits after spouses died, breadwinners died, we'd incur about a $500 loss each month. That's the approximate amount of the cutback. That's just not fair, especially in this economy. And so we want to see more and more people join in. It'd be interesting if Senator Husted would join the fight, but he doesn't seem to want to. He said, well, that would be just one of the largest tax increases, I think he said. At any rate, it's just wrong to think in those terms. This is our system for workers. We built it for ourselves because the private sector wouldn't. We started this out in the 30s when we were still fighting to join and together and build unions. In a rational way, we fought through and finally won some benefits. We look toward Social Security as that floor for retirement. It's there for us when a spouse dies. My dad died at 48 years old. My mom had 2 kids still at home. My brother and sister who were younger, still were in primary and high school. My mother needed to get back in the workforce. This was the benefit that helped her move forward and saved our family. It was there when my work partner in AFSCME Council 8 had a disability hit him at 56. Social Security has been there for him and his family so that he could retire out on disability and have a secure ability to keep his family firm and stable. So Social Security is there for me. I'm 80 years old, have retired when I was about 67. It's that stable social insurance we built for ourselves because the private sector would not provide that kind of benefit.
Well, I must say you're a young 80, Norm. I think you and I are old enough to remember what happened in the early 80s when Reagan was president. And, much like what we're talking about now with Bernie Moreno and Elizabeth Warren, the two sides have to come together. In order to get things done, you need Republicans to work with Democrats and Democrats to work with Republicans. And hopefully that will happen here. So let's talk about politics. You mentioned Husted, not in favor. Sherrod Brown has come out in favor of scrapping the cap, right?
Absolutely. He's been with us on so many issues in terms of the protection of retirement and the stability of our families. He's been there on this campaign to scrap the cap for years. He wants to see additional kinds of things done to stabilize Social Security for the next several generations, not just generation by generation. Workers now face so many different kinds of things. You look at John Husted, who says something like, well, people who are on the lower end of the economy, they just don't quite know how to negotiate the real world. Really? We've been through how many recessions since Reagan? We went through the Great Recession because of his buddies in the billionaire class who wanted to play fancy with our finances and drove the entire world into near depression. That just seems to be it's so out of touch and so beyond. The Husted just isn't there. Last year, Senator Husted had many opportunities to show what he would do to support retirees. The Alliance tracks that. We have a voting record. It's there on our website for everybody to see. He voted against Medicaid. Medicaid is the primary way where we finance our long-term care in nursing homes. Medicaid is for folks who didn't earn enough because of these multiple recessions, bankruptcies, rust belting of the Ohio economy. We've been through so many things. It is so ironic that he would say, "Well, people don't know how to negotiate the real world." Actually, the opposite is true. Workers throughout Ohio, throughout our entire national economy, have had to figure out how to to work around the kinds of financial barriers that keep being erected by the billionaire class. The money class just doesn't give a damn about us.
Yeah, Houston is certainly not alone in that camp. There's a lot of them out there. They just don't understand working people and their needs. It's pretty simple. All right, one more issue here. I remember talking to Rich about this, about getting artificial intelligence out of traditional Medicare, and apparently this is a pilot program. Why don't you refresh our listeners on what's going on right now? This is scary stuff.
Well, the Congress somehow thinks that workers who are retired or on disability using Medicare somehow were gaming the system, that we were the generous generation of over expenditures. Let's put it that way. The long and short of this is they invented this thing called the WISER program. It ain't wise, and it's certainly wrong for all of us. It basically requires us to get prior authorization for specific kinds of things. In this instance, they've been applying it to Medicare Advantage plans a lot. And it just meant denial, delay in terms of people getting treatment. I believe the statistic is somewhere between 85 and 90% of those denials or delays in treatment actually eventually get passed along and people get the treatment. But it just means months. It means that so if you've had a workplace injury, let's say you were on workers' compensation for years, and you've been receiving a specific kind of pain treatment, something called a vagus nerve stimulation. This would say, when you went on Medicare, no, you got to get prior authorization over and over and over again under this program. We don't want that. The wrongness of this is there's a financial incentive. It was one thing when human beings were playing this game of denial. Now they've given it to an algorithm, an artificial intelligence being, supposedly, that just it has an incentive to say, no, not going to treat you. No, we'll just delay it. And so as a worker is there in agony with pain and trying to manage the pain, this artificial intelligence is saying no and getting the company that set up the algorithm paid for it. That's just wrong. So we want to see this gone. It's a way of lining corporate pockets, lining the billionaire class again and again and again. It's just wrong. So we want to see it gone. The good thing is that the House Appropriations Committee has seen enough complaints from you and me as workers to say, well, maybe we ought to take a look at this. We're hoping that they actually scrap this entirely in this next budget cycle. This is an experiment that's going on in 7 states. Ohio's become a target this year, and many workers are being denied access to treatment that they've already had plans for over the years. And this seems wrong for everybody.
Norm, you said something that I want to repeat as we button up this podcast here. You mentioned that a lot of people are complaining. Well, those of you listening to this podcast, keep complaining. Your voice matters. You know that. I mean, you've been in the labor movement a long time. You got to yell and scream and say, you know what, this contract ain't right. We need more. We need better health care. We don't need cuts to Medicare. Keep complaining. I'll leave it on that note. retiredamericans.org is a website you want to go to. You take care. Great job. thank you so much. Hope to be talking to you in the not too distant future. Okay, brother?
See you soon.
And that'll be it for yet another edition of America's Workforce. Coming up on Monday, the American Federation of Musicians and the North Coast Federation of Labor. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful weekend.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.